Okay, we are ready for the next chapter in Champions of the Warrior King. And this is the story of the apostles, so it goes along with the New Testament, Acts of the Apostles, and forward. This chapter is called Thaddeus. Thaddeus entered the courtyard with a gigantic bundle of reeds balanced on his head. He walked over to where his father was working and then paraded back and forth. Such poise, such balance, such a large bundle of reeds. Are you lucky to have me for a son or what? The boy's father looked up and chuckled. And so brave, he said, facing all those dangers down there collecting reeds by the river. Yes, Thaddeus said, being careful not to nod and drop his bundle. Fearlessly harvesting reeds, caring not for the roars of the hippos or the crocodiles smiling at me from under the water. Yes, but I've heard the real danger was snakes that get into your bundle and slither down to whisper in your ear as you're walking home. He reached over and tickled Thaddeus's ear from behind with a long blade of grass. With a shriek, the boy dropped his bundle and scratched his ear. You can scream almost as well as a girl, his father said with a laugh. That was a terrible thing to do, his father shouted. Sometimes I think you're the best father in the world, and other times I think you have a rotten streak running through you. But, he winked at his father, I'm always so glad to have you back. His father put his arm around him. I'm glad to be back, too. So glad. Watching them from above, I nodded. Life was certainly a lot different for this little family since the mighty sun had healed Thaddeus's father of his demon possession. A few years before, Thaddeus and his mother had struggled in poverty, continually facing the possibility of starvation, while his father ran screaming through the cemeteries, demon-possessed and unaware of his own surroundings most of the time. Now they were a real family again. I love that we're now a whole family, the boy blurted. Well, son, his father said, smiling, we're going to be even more of a family yet. What do you mean? Thaddeus asked, his brow crinkling. You know, mother, father, brothers, sisters. Brothers? Sisters? The boy echoed. Yes, his father said happily. Your mother's going to have a baby, and you'll have a brother or a sister. Thaddeus frowned. What's the matter? You and mother? Thaddeus mumbled. Yes, that's what normal families do. They grow. The boy shuddered. You know about family stuff, his father continued. We've talked about that. Yeah, I know. Other families. But you and mother? His father laughed again. Yes, mother and I, just like other families. It will be several months yet, so you have time to get used to the idea and be properly grateful to the Most High when the child actually arrives. The boy nodded slowly, then shook his head. I was glad that the humans couldn't hear me when I laughed. Human children always seem so shocked that their own parents would have normal feelings and create children just as everyone else does, and Thaddeus was no exception. Where is mother right now? He asked. She's over sweeping the other courtyard. The boy picked up the scattered bundle of reeds from the ground. He had never seen a house with two courtyards before they had moved to Damascus. In Gadara, he and his mother had lived in a tiny shack, but many of the more well-to-do pig farmers had homes with courtyards and small rooms built around them. Uncle Judah's house had been like that at one time, and then he had constructed a second courtyard for his inn, the main inn on the road entering Damascus. It had a large courtyard with a sheltering roof along one wall, supported by wooden posts. The shelter had two rooms at the very end in case the inn had especially wealthy guests who wanted privacy. The guest who used the shelter received a safe place for them and their animals to sleep overnight. It was enclosed so the animals wouldn't run away and locked securely at the gate so that no one in Damascus would rob them. Back in Gadara, Thaddeus and his family had attracted a lot of attention after Yeshua had healed his father. At first, everyone was amazed to find him clothed and in his right mind and wanting to continue his life where it had left off before the creeping madness had set in. But the popularity was fleeting. For when Yeshua had cast the spirits out of his father, they had entered a herd of swine up on the hillside. The pigs then ran off a cliff into the Sea of Galilee. Perhaps the demons had stampeded the herd to turn the people against Yeshua. If nothing else, having had the town's economy decimated in a single blow made the local people much less pleased about the healing of Thaddeus's father. Quite frankly, the pigs were more valuable to them, and they became angry. As a result, Thaddeus and his family had to leave. Uncle Judas had invited them to come to his home in Syria. He had offered them a place to stay for as long as they needed at his inn on Straight Street in exchange for their help with the business. Uncle Judas's wife had recently died, and he had had only daughters. The last one had been married off some years ago, so he had plenty of room and plenty of money, but he needed some family and a little help. It was good for all of them and was working out well. Thaddeus was making new friends and learning some interesting things about Damascus. According to local legend, the city was built on the site where Cain had murdered his brother Abel. When Thaddeus asked how they had kept the site marked even during the Great Flood, everyone just laughed at him and said he would have to ask Noah. Still, it was definitely the spot. Tradition also said that Uz, the grandson of Shem, had built Damascus, and somewhere around here in the land of Uz was where Job had lived. Thaddeus had heard the stories of Job from the rabbi in the synagogue. Even though Damascus was in Syria, it had 30 synagogues in town to accommodate the large Hebrew population. Some Jews had always lived in Damascus. Now, a lot more did. Also, followers of Yeshua had reached Damascus before Thaddeus and his family ever got there, especially since the death of the young deacon Stephen in Jerusalem. The followers of Yeshua had fled the holy city in every direction because of the fierce persecution. The ringleader seemed to be a man people had named Saul, the saint slayer, or in Jerusalem just referred to as Saul the Slayer. He spearheaded the campaign to ferret out the followers of Yeshua by learning their secrets, finding their hiding places, and then dragging them out and executing them, whether they were men, women, or children. Thaddeus took a deep breath. They were lucky that Uncle Judas lived in Syria. What if their own relatives had lived in Jerusalem? He shuddered. Things were probably worse for followers of Yeshua in Jerusalem than they had been for those in Gadara. He piled the reeds over in the corner where they kept them to dry. We are greatly blessed, he thought to himself, not just to live with Uncle Judas, but also that Mother grew up in a family of basket weavers. And here in Damascus there are 2 rivers with plenty of reeds growing free for anyone who wants them. His family had been able to start a business, and Mother had taught both Thaddeus and his father how to weave baskets. This way, though Uncle Judas was providing them a place to live, they were able to earn their own income and buy the things the family needed. The boy drew another deep breath. Yes, life was good. The clamor at the gate announced the presence of guests. "I need to speak to the innkeeper," a deep voice shouted from outside. "My name is Judas. I am the innkeeper of this establishment," the boy's uncle replied as he opened the gate to reveal a tall man standing there. "How may I help you?" "We had a problem on the way to Damascus," the man said, "and we need shelter and some help for this man for a few days." He gestured towards someone sitting hunched over on the back of a horse. "Our leader will need someone to help him with personal care while some of us go back to the Sanhedrin and find out what they want to do right now." "I see," said Uncle Judas. "Who is your leader?" "His name is Saul." Uncle Judas stared. So did Thaddeus. "Saul of Tarsus? Saul the Slayer?" Uncle Judas stuttered. The name of Saul struck fear into hearts of the followers of Yeshua everywhere. Yet the man on the back of the horse hardly looked fearful himself. He seemed much smaller than one would have imagined him. His shoulders drooped, and he had his headpiece wrapped around his face so no one could see it. But he was obviously either quite ill or extremely distraught. "Bring him in," Uncle Judas said after a long pause. This young man is Thaddeus, and he will care for Saul's needs as long as he stays here. There will be an extra charge, of course, for the personal care, as well as a surcharge for putting him in a room, for I take it you don't want him out in the courtyard alone." "We will pay whatever you require," the man answered. "Put him in your best room." "Ah, very good," said Uncle Judas. "Bring him this way. Can he speak?" The tall man nodded. "Very well, place him in here. Thaddeus, you get anything the man asks you for." Then he spoke both to Saul and the other men. "Thaddeus is very shy and doesn't speak much." He stared hard at Thaddeus as if to say, "For this week at least, please be shy and don't talk. But he will get whatever you need." Thaddeus understood. He helped the men lift Saul from the back of the horse and assist him onto a pallet in the corner of the room, where he curled up in a fetal position and pulled his prayer shawl up over his face. He certainly didn't look very frightening. Frightened was more like it. As if reading his mind, the tall man turned to Thaddeus and said, "He is a very powerful man. He's just ill. The Sanhedrin sent him here after he dealt with the followers of Yeshua in Jerusalem. Rumor has it that Matthew, one of the 12, has fled here, as well as many other followers." Thaddeus paled. How could they know about Matthew? Everyone had been extremely careful to keep it a secret. "I will bring him some water," the boy said, "and some food from the kitchens. Perhaps that will refresh him from his difficult trip." When he returned, the other men in the group had left, and only the tall one with the deep voice remained. "I wanted to make sure you got back here before I left," he said. "You're leaving too? No one is going to stay here with Saul?" "It's a bit awkward," the man explained. "I will tell you a little of what happened just so you can understand our position. We came here with Saul with the intent of cleaning the followers of Yeshua out of Damascus. However, something happened along the road." "An accident?" "No, not exactly. There was a very bright light and a sound like thunder, although there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. The light was so bright that it knocked us to the ground and Saul from his horse." "He was hurt in the fall?" "No, let me finish," the man said impatiently. "For a shy child who doesn't talk much, you certainly interrupt." Thaddeus bowed his head and bit his tongue. "We heard only loud rumbling like thunder, but Saul said that he saw Yeshua himself and that Yeshua asked him why he was persecuting him. The light has stricken Saul blind, though the rest of us were able to see once it subsided. He feels that Yeshua has punished him." All this time he thought that the deacon Stephen had committed blasphemy by claiming that he had seen Yeshua at the right hand of God, and yet now Saul claims to have seen him too. He doesn't know what to do. Now that he is blind, he feels he will no longer be of use to the Sanhedrin, and if he tells his story, they may want to kill him. Yet if he doesn't share it, he fears something worse might happen to him. He's very ill and confused and depressed. The man shook his head in puzzlement and frustration. "And the rest of us are just afraid and don't know what to do. I'm going to stay in Damascus, but in a different part of the city. And I will be back to visit, but not unless I know it's safe. If the Sanhedrin decide to come after him, you will be safe. You must work at the inn, and Saul's just your guest. But treat him well, for he has been an important man. Indeed, he's a leading Pharisee and a student of Gamaliel." "I will take good care of him," Thaddeus said cautiously. "Thank you, and I must be going." He put his hand on the smaller man's shoulder. "I'm leaving now, Saul. I will be back in a few days." Saul didn't move or say anything. With a shrug, the tall man left. "Is there anything I can get for you, sir?" Thaddeus asked. Silence. "I'm going back to the kitchens for a few minutes, but I will return. Don't worry. We will take good care of you, and everything will be all right." "No," said the voice under the prayer shawl. "Nothing will ever be all right again." All right, some time has passed. "Honest, Father, it's Saul of Tarsus. Saul the saint slayer, right over there in the other courtyard in one of the rooms. Really, his father said? He must have run out of followers of Yeshua to kill in Jerusalem. Yes, that's what his companions told us, that Saul has official papers from the authorities to extradite fugitive believers. I guess that would be us. Well, he doesn't look as if he could hurt us very badly, Thaddeus commented. That's because he's sick now, his father sighed. He has quite a reputation for cruelty. The tall man said that he is a very important Pharisee. What exactly is a Pharisee? Father took a deep breath. A Pharisee is a very educated Jew who studied the traditions of the elders as well as the law of Moses. Their interpretations are different from some of those of the Sadducees. What kinds of interpretations? Oh, I don't know. I'm not very educated in that stuff, but I know that the Pharisees think that the dead will be resurrected and that Sadducees don't. And the Pharisees believe in angels and the Sadducees don't. Beyond that, I'm not quite sure, but I bet if you ask our guest what he feels when he feels better, he could spend days explaining it to you. Right now, he's just curled up with his prayer shawl pulled over his face so that no one can see him. Don't let his looks deceive you, Father said quietly. What I've heard about him is pretty frightening. He may just be acting ill so that we will feel sorry for him and lower our guard until he finds out where everyone's hiding. Then he'll catch all of us. Don't feel sorry for him, no matter how pitiful he acts. And whatever you do, be very careful of what you say. I will, Father. And remember, son, it's never just your life that you protect or endanger. It's also my life and the lives of your mother and our coming baby. I'll be careful. You can trust me, Father. Come here, Thaddeus, Mother called. Please try to feed some of this stew to our guest. He hasn't had any food or drink for some time now. While I'm not fond of the man, I certainly don't want him to die here with us. Maybe he doesn't need food and water, the boy mumbled. Maybe he just lives on anger. He hadn't meant for his mother to hear, but she sighed. Some people seem to, she said. Still, see what you can do. Thaddeus took the tray. The little man shook his head when the boy offered the food. It's been 3 days, Thaddeus said. You haven't had any food or any water. If you don't drink or eat, you will die. That's the general idea, isn't it? Saul replied. He raised up on one elbow. I'm being punished. Go away and leave me alone. The boy shrugged. Well, I know you can't see, he said, but don't you think that if God wanted you to die, he would have just killed you then? You don't understand. I saw Yeshua, the risen Lord, in all his glory. How could you understand? I saw him in his undergarments, Thaddeus blurted without even thinking. In his undergarments? Blasphemy! The blind man swung with his fist. How can you say such things about the Messiah, you blasphemous youth? You should be beaten within an inch of your life. One of his fists connected with the tray, and it went splattering against the wall, lentils running down the doorpost like teardrops. With his other hand, he grabbed Thaddeus by the leg and knocked him to the floor and began flailing his fist wildly against him. Suddenly, a grip as strong as iron seized Saul's wrist. Not here, he said. Not my son, and not in my house. You're not at the Sanhedrin now. The angry little man stiffened. If you're going to convince him of anything, you're going to have to do it by persuasion, not violence. Thaddeus's father continued, You have no jurisdiction here. This is Damascus, remember? That's not true, the angry little Pharisee insisted. I have official papers right here in my pouch. He felt around for it. I have the authority of Rome for extradition of fugitive Jewish believers right here in Damascus. His voice trailed off into silence as he realized he no longer had a pouch. I expect that your traveling companions have made off with it, and whatever money you had. Saul pulled his prayer shawl over his head again. Go away, he said distantly. Certainly. Come on, Thaddeus. As they walked out into the courtyard, Thaddeus's father looked at his son's face and said, You'll have quite a bruise where he hit you." The boy smiled. "I was really happy to see you come when you did." His father's face clouded over. "I may not have been here to protect you all those years, my son, but nobody is going to hurt you now." Though Thad knew it was dangerous, he still felt drawn back to the guest room in the back corner. He stood just outside the doorway, listening. "How could this happen to me?" Saul moaned softly. "I'm an honored man, a member of the Sanhedrin. I trained under Gamaliel, the grandson of Hillel and the Pharisee of Pharisees. I could hold my own against the best of them. How could I end up like this?" I thought that Stephen's claim that he saw Yeshua standing at the right hand of Jehovah God was blasphemy. Yet now I've seen him too. What am I going to do now? I've seen the risen Lord. I might as well die. Before Thaddeus realized what he was doing, he had slipped around the corner and into the room. "You don't have to die," he said softly. "And I did see him too. Do you want to hear about it?" Saul stopped rocking. "Yes," he said after a moment. "When I was a little boy, my father became possessed by a demon," Thaddeus began. "He was violent, and no one could do anything with him. He and another man ended up living like animals in the graveyards outside of our town." "Where did you live?" the Pharisee demanded. "In Gadara." The blind man raised an eyebrow. "Your father was one of the demoniacs of Gadara? I had heard they got pushed off a cliff where all those pigs died." Thaddeus laughed. "We were afraid they were going to do that, and they threatened to, but they let us leave town instead. Because my uncle owns this inn, we came here. I don't know where the other man and his family went." "So you saw Yeshua, the risen Lord?" "Well, sort of," said Thad. "He wasn't risen then, because he hadn't died yet." Saul slowly sat up and nodded. "True, that would have been before then. So why were you sneaking up on him? For surely you must have done that to catch him in his undergarments. Of course, you are pretty good at slipping up on people. You've been doing it to me." "No, no," the boy protested. "I didn't. When he cast the demons out of my father and his friends, they were naked. They'd been running without clothes like wild animals for years. The first thing that Yeshua did was to take off his own robe and put it around my father. And he made one of his disciples take off his for the other man. They sent me back to the village to get some of my father's clothes. Yeshua cared about his dignity and was willing to stand there in his undergarments, waiting for me to return from town, so that my father wouldn't have to be embarrassed by being naked in front of everyone after Yeshua had healed his mind." Thaddeus choked up and could hardly speak. It was the first time I had ever seen anyone care about my father, except for my mother. "So you and your family are loyal followers of his?" Saul said slowly. Thaddeus felt a sinking sensation in the pit of his stomach. What if it was all a trick? What if the slayer was sitting here pretending to be blind and sick, and he had just betrayed his entire family to the Sanhedrin's agent? His legs staggered as he slid down the wall and sat on the floor. "Afraid to answer, aren't you? After all that the risen Lord did for your father, you're not even willing to answer me? Are you going to kill us?" The little man let out a moan and started to rock, holding his head in his hands again. "Ah, whatever am I going to do? What am I going to do?" he just kept mumbling. Shakily, the boy scrambled to his feet and raced out of the room as fast as he could. A loud thudding began on the front gate. Father lifted the bar, opened the gate, and then whispered, "Ananias, what are you doing here? It's not safe. You must leave. We can meet another time for whatever you need to discuss." The man shook his head. "No, God sent me here." "Yes, yes," said Father, "I know. He sent us all here. But really, this is not a good time. Please leave." Ananias smiled grimly. "I don't feel any more comfortable about this than you do," he said. "But the Lord told me who your guest is, and the Lord told me that I must speak with him." "He's going to be the death of us all," Father replied. Thaddeus has already been on the receiving end of his fist. The visitor glanced over at the boy and his bruised eye. I know he's dangerous, but the Lord told me to come. I have to do this. If you must, then let us come with you. The three walked into Saul's chamber. He had stopped rocking back and forth and was curled back up in his old position on the floor. Brother Saul, Ananias said, the Lord has sent me to heal you of your blindness and to tell you that he has called you to minister to the Gentiles. He will be teaching you in the next few days the things you must know and the things you will have to endure in his service. By now the Pharisee was sitting upright on the floor. Ananias put his hands on Saul's head. Just then the Pharisee gave a sharp gasp. I can see, he cried. I can see you. It's as if something like scales just fell off my eyes. I thought I was going to be blind the rest of my life. He looked around at Thaddeus and the two older men. Thank you. Oh, thank you. He stood. You have much to learn, Ananias said. Don't you want to sit down? No, I feel wonderful, Saul protested. I've met the risen Lord, and now I've been healed. I need to go tell everyone. Where's the nearest synagogue? Ananias shook his head. You must be very careful, Brother Saul. Are you sure you want to call him Brother Saul? Thaddeus's father whispered. I mean, are we sure yet? The Lord has healed his blindness, Ananias replied softly. I'm sure he has work for him and knows what he's doing. Will you direct me to the nearest synagogue? Saul repeated to the boy. Brother Saul, Ananias interrupted, you must be very careful. There are many who would like to see the followers of the risen Christ imprisoned and killed. Truly, we thought that was why you came here to Damascus. Yes, Saul said sadly, it was. I knew it, Thaddeus' father declared, but I met him on the way. Ananias raised an eyebrow. Then you must be very careful for your safety. Going to the synagogue and preaching may make those there want to kill you too. Nonsense, the little man insisted. Not when they hear who I am. I am Saul of the Sanhedrin, a Pharisee trained under Gamaliel, grandson of Hillel. Yes, we know all that, Ananias assured him. Just be careful. The Lord said he was going to be sending you to the Gentiles. Saul seemed to shrink within himself. I would much rather preach at the local synagogue. Yes, I'm sure you would, Thaddeus' father observed. You Pharisees avoid associating with Gentiles if at all possible. Surely you're not going to let Gentiles into your group. Saul looked pointedly at Ananias and Thaddeus' father. Ananias shrugged, and father looked at the floor. You have Gentiles among you already? Until recently, Ananias explained, I had no great love for Gentiles either. But, well, Philip made his trip into Samaria, and many Samaritans have become believers. If they accept Yeshua... Samaritans? Saul exploded. I hated the believers to start with. The fact that they'll accept Samaritans into their group? Oh, it's a good thing I didn't know that before now. Well, Ananias continued, you'll be safer preaching to the Samaritans than you would be to the Jews around here. Saul paused for a moment. Yes, he said, I do have much to learn, don't I? I have heard that Matthew, one of the 12, is living here in Damascus, or at least close to here. Could you take me to him? Father laughed. Not a chance. We have risked our lives caring for your needs and giving you hospitality and answering your questions honestly. Ananias put his life in jeopardy because the Lord sent him here to heal you of your blindness and to tell you what his plans are for you. Now you can be a follower of the risen Lord without being friends with me and my family, and you can certainly be a follower of the risen Lord without ever meeting Matthew. We will not divulge Matthew's hiding place to you. You are right, he said after a long pause. I do have much to learn. But I will not impose on your hospitality any further. I thank you for caring for me during the time of my blindness, and whether or not you believe me, I will serve Yeshua, HaMashiach, in whatever way he shows me." "Where will you go? You have no money," Thaddeus blurted. "My father did not leave me helpless," Saul said, quickly suppressing his frustration. "He made sure all of his sons learned a practical trade in addition to our religious schooling. I'm a skilled tent maker. If you will direct me to the part of the city where the tent makers live, shall earn my keep there." Father nodded. "Well, you will get to know the Gentiles then, because that's the people you'll be staying with. If you follow this road," he led Saul out of the courtyard and pointed him in the direction of the city's tent makers. "It will be quite a walk," he cautioned him. "The tent makers are on the outskirts of town, on the other side. But if you just follow Straight Street, this road right here, it goes all the way through." "I thank you," he said awkwardly, "and I pray the blessings of the risen Yeshua HaMashiach on you." He said it awkwardly, as if it were the first time it had ever passed through his lips. "I will go with you," Ananias volunteered. Saul stared at him for a moment and then nodded. "Good," he said. "You can baptize me at the river." Thaddeus's mouth dropped open in shock, but Ananias answered smoothly, "Of course," and the two headed for the other side of town. "Are we safe?" Thaddeus asked breathlessly. His father put his arm around him. "As safe as we've ever been here," he said slowly. "No one on the face of the earth is ever totally safe. Yet surely Father God would not have restored the sight of this Pharisee so that he could kill us." Some time has passed. Thaddeus scooped his sister, Helena, onto his shoulders. "Come on, baby," he said. "Do you need a ride?" Helena squealed with glee and dug her chubby fingers into his curly hair to hang on for balance. Her brother jogged across the courtyard, causing her shrieks of joy to come out in little bursts as she bounced on his neck. When he stopped, she screamed, "More, more! Go, go!" Suddenly, he heard someone knocking. He carried his sister over to the door of the family courtyard and cautiously peered out. Then he quickly opened it and pulled the man in from the street. "Saul, what are you doing here? It's dangerous. Why did you come back? We heard you had left town and gone to the deserts of Arabia." "I did, and I've been out there for a long time." The young man nodded. "Yes, long enough for me to have a little sister." "Go, go!" Helena screamed. "Just a minute, baby," Thaddeus said. "Sit still." He held onto her ankles carefully so that she couldn't fall as she bounced wildly, trying to get him to carry her around some more. "I thought I'd been gone long enough," Saul continued. "Someone needs to preach the truth here in Damascus. And, well, I've spent a lot of time with the Lord and preached to a lot of Gentiles. And I decided that it's been long enough that people will have forgotten how angry they were with me." "I don't think they have," Thaddeus murmured. "Well, I thought I'd stop by and say hello to you. I'm not planning to stay here at your family inn, so it won't bring any danger to you. I will lodge in the tent makers' part of town. I still have a few friends there, I think." "I hope you're right, Saul. I hope you're right." "Well, it's good to see you. I'll be leaving now, and I'm glad to see that your little sister is growing strong and healthy." Thaddeus smiled. "Go, go!" Helena persisted. With a nod at Saul, Thaddeus again trotted his sister around on his shoulders. Stepping out into the street, Saul closed the gate behind him, and Thaddeus continued to play with his baby sister. Only a few days later, Saul knocked at the gate again. This time, Thaddeus's father let him in and quickly shut it behind him. In a few moments, a group of angry men strode down the street past the closed gate. "He came this way! I saw him!" one of them was shouting. Thaddeus's eyes widened. He motioned to Saul to step over to the part of the courtyard they had devoted to basket weaving. Saul was not a tall man, for having such a reputation in his past, he thought. Quickly, he took the lid off one of their largest storage baskets, one they had just finished that week. He motioned for the reformed persecutor to climb into the basket, and then slapped the lid back on it. It was just in time. The group banged on the gate, and Father opened it. "We're looking for that exiled Pharisee who came by. Have you seen him?" "You're welcome to look around," Father told them. "We have no guests in the inn this early in the day." The men swarmed around the courtyard and peered cautiously into the family rooms and storage rooms. Finding nothing, they said, "If you see him, let us know." Uncle Judas nodded. "I certainly will." Thaddeus scowled. How could his uncle promise something like that? Picking up his sister, he held her tight. His mother sat in the basketry nook, weaving baskets as she did many hours a day. She also said nothing. The men left, and Thaddeus's father and Uncle Judas closed and barred the gate. "What are we going to do?" Thaddeus whispered to his father. "Will Uncle really tell them?" His father shook his head. "No, but your uncle didn't see him. I just told him what we were doing. Uncle Judas will stay out of the way and avoid any contact with him. He promised the men he would tell them if he saw him, but so far he hasn't seen him." A sick feeling in his stomach, Thaddeus shook his head. He hugged his little sister tight until she squirmed to get down. Had he brought danger to her because of his friendship with the ex-Pharisee? Closing his eyes, he leaned against the wall. "God of Israel," he whispered, "and God of Damascus, and the God who healed my father, help me to know what to do right now. Please don't let my family be hurt because of something that I did. Please give me wisdom and help us. I can't believe that you would want my friend Saul to die when he loves you so much, and my family loves you too, except for Helena, who is too young. But she would if she ever met you. I remember what Yeshua was like with children." Then he smiled to himself. Suddenly he realized that he was smiling in his prayer instead of pleading for help. A feeling of warmth seemed to spread its glow through him and take away the fear in the pit of his stomach. Running to his father, he said, "I have an idea." Then he whispered with his father for several minutes. His father nodded. "Tonight. Meanwhile, we need to keep everything quiet and as normal as possible here." They moved the large basket in which Paul hid into their private family quarters so that no one in the courtyard or the inn would see it. Mother showed up moments later with food and a small jug of water. "Here," she told Saul, "you must stay hidden because the evening guests will arrive and want to get settled by sundown. Until then, you must be quiet and remain back here. There will be many people milling around the courtyard with their animals, and it will be noisy, but you must stay out of sight. Too many people know who you are. We will help you escape later in the night, when everyone is asleep." "But how?" he asked. "It's best we don't talk right now. The less said, the better. Eat and try to rest, for you're going to be traveling most of the night." Thaddeus smiled as a thought struck him. Had God provided the reeds and his mother's previous basket-weaving skills just to support their family when they had arrived with no way to make a living? Or had it all been part of a plan formed a long time ago so that they would have big storage baskets so that they could hide Saul and help him escape? Finally he shrugged. I smiled. Every once in a while, humans have a little glimpse of the intricate plans the Almighty has made for their lives, and they get just a little peek into the gentle care and detailed attention that God gives them. God puts many details into their preparations years beforehand to care for them during times of need. For now, Thaddeus may forget his little glimpse, but time and again throughout his life he will continue to see more of them. Yet it won't be until he joins the Mighty One and Yeshua in their heavenly home and discovers what really was happening during all of those times that he will grasp all that Yeshua has done for him. Until then, he remains loyal to his God despite the fact that he does not understand the Creator's working. I want to stop right there and just make a comment. I have kept journals throughout my lifetime of all of the times that the Lord has worked out intricate details for me, and it is overwhelming to think back on those things. It's something that we really need to contemplate as Christians, that we serve a God who works out every little detail of our lives for our good and for His glory. Okay, time has passed. By midnight, everyone in the courtyard seemed asleep. The animals had settled down. The campfires were just faintly glowing coals in the darkness. Thaddeus's father helped Saul out of the basket. "Stretch your legs," he said, "and do what you need to. Then follow us up to the roof." Then he and his son carried the basket up to the roof. Mother brought a small packet that she put into the basket. "Bread and dried fruit for your journey," she said. "He'll need it. And some water." She placed a small water skin in next to it. Saul followed them up and climbed obediently back into the basket. Thaddeus and his father and mother carefully tied ropes around it so that they could safely lower it. "It's fortunate that we live right on the city wall," Father commented. "Although that's the logical place to have an inn, there are men guarding the gates at both ends of the city, so do not go by the main road. As soon as you get out of the basket, head off into the desert and don't come back here. Our people have a long memory." "God bless you and your family for your kindness to me," Saul said. Father's voice softened. "And may He also bless you and take you safely wherever you must go." Reaching over, Saul gently squeezed Thaddeus's shoulder. "And God bless you especially," he said. "He has great plans for your life." The younger man smiled. Then he and his father and mother gently lowered the basket over the wall. It reached the ground with a soft thud, and it was only moments before they felt the 3 tugs on the rope, their sign to pull it back up. Quickly, they coiled the rope back up and tossed it into the corner on the roof where it had been before, and carried the basket back down the steps and inside their home. No sign now remained that anything unusual had happened. "Thank you, Father God," Thaddeus whispered, "and thank you, Yeshua, my friend and my God." "Amen," his father added. "Oh, I didn't realize that I said that out loud." His father hugged him. "It's all right. I'm thankful too." I want us all to remember today that we are living in times that are a little uncertain, but God is definitely in control, and just like Saul commented to Thaddeus, He has great plans for each of our lives. I'd like us to think about that today. Think about how we can be filled with the Holy Spirit and how we can allow the Spirit to guide our every step, because God has a plan. He's coming soon, and He wants us to tell the world